Yeah, that's kind of a very broad topic, and maybe we can be a little more specific with. We're actually going to be talking about metrics, using metrics, and
versus not using metrics,
yeah,
and how to use metrics,
and maybe using a combination of those, and just to alleviate some fears that some of our viewers might have. Don't get too worried. We're not going to be talking about actual, terminologies and going into depth and how you should use them. And also, we won't be, you don't have to worry like, hey, I'm just an indie developer. I'm all by myself. I don't even care about this stuff. This is all for those fancy free-to-play mobile folks, and I don't care about that stuff. And we kind of are going to talk about that it's not just for, metrics have been around long before those games have been around, that are utilizing them the way that free-to-play is.
So it's just a tool that you should be utilizing, because most probably if you're making a game, you're asking yourself, is anybody going to like it? Is anybody going to care? Is this good? Is this a good feature? What feature should we do? Should we do any features at all? All these questions.
Should we even make this game?
Yeah. So, and metric is one way of finding out. But maybe we go back like a couple steps backwards. Like we both have, of course, different professional careers, and I come from maybe more the background where there's a lot of like assumptions being done, like where people are guessing, and then you have nothing to really back up your opinion necessarily. Whereas Arash has more maybe the background of, you would have metrics, but then you don't know the context or semantics. These are fancy. Hi, Hoffern, welcome.
What's up, dude?
So, you have them, but you're not putting them in kind of relations to human beings. Like, you don't know what's happening in the game. Well, hopefully not. We should be running quite okay right now.
Yeah, I think we're running okay. If anybody in the stream is having problems seeing or hearing us, please tell us.
Yeah, just try refreshing. It usually helps.
Yeah, try refreshing.
Yeah, I'm sorry for the commercials for the people who have to see those then.
Yeah, but it's good to see you back.
Yeah. So, well, you can maybe talk from your point of view, kind of. Slightly, kind of. What were the issues with?
Well, I wouldn't say they were just issues. I don't think it's anything wrong. It's good to use metrics, but it's this goes. I always talk about free to play this way, but metrics is the same way. You can use metrics in a good way. Well, you can use metrics in the right way or the wrong way, and then also you could think that you're using it in the right way, but in reality, you're using it the wrong way. So, I would say, like, most of my background has been, it started off, let's start off. We're just talking about the games industry right now. I have a different background if we go further back, but from the games point of view, it was starting off with browser-based, and then mobile games are kind of where I've spent most of my professional game career.
And I guess those kind of games started the whole metric scenes in the game industry. Like, a lot of games didn't have any kind of metrics, which means like values they're measuring, saying is it doing good or bad.
Exactly. And So what was happening in those earlier days, it was kind of it still is the wild, wild west. It's just in a different period of maturity now. But back then it was a little baby, or in its infancy. And I can only speak from my personal experience. There's probably lots of other people that were on the team or the companies I were working in or in similar companies that had different experiences. So these are all just mine and Björn's own personal experiences. Just please take that with a grain of salt. So we may say something that's different from yours.
It's more like just showing different situations.
Exactly.
But go on.
So what was happening in those days was almost like there was only a few different, let's call them game mechanics that were in place that kind of were proven, and and then there were some metrics that were tied to those mechanics, and they knew that, okay, if we implement this mechanic and we pay attention to this metric, it should result in this type of number, and we should see this type of result. And if this result happens, it's good. And if it isn't above this result, it's bad. And then they would make their choices based off of those. So it was very kind of, I don't remember the official term that was bouncing around back then, but it was kind of like metric driven design, and it was very, very hardcore. It was almost like basically in the very beginning, it was pretty much just a numbers game. You weren't really looking, you only used a few mechanics. And if you remember from our previous episodes, if you don't remember, the mechanics were, I say the game mechanics, but they're the things that the actions the players are taking. But what they were doing is, on top of those mechanics, they were using different systems, which were basically limiters to actions that the players could take. A very, very, very old one. I wouldn't say not in use today, but kind of the beginning, like energy, like, you have X number of actions that you can perform within a specific time. And then when that's up, you have to pay money. Again, this is from a free to play angle, or to continue, or you wait till your actions recharge. These have to do with retention, these type of stuff. So what was happening was, it was very, very strongly metric driven, and kind of most of these decisions were not really made really aggressively with design in mind. They were more on, these things work, or the things, kind of throwing stuff at the wall, and what sticks. Once we realize what sticks, we just keep doing that over and over and over. And
what would you say is that, like, was the problem?
Well, what
Like,
would happen?
How did it affect the game, like, in general?
Well, again, if we're talking from free to play, things are different. But when you develop free to play games, you don't have any money from the player, so you have to, like, as they play the game, you have to deliver a good enough experience for them to hang around long enough, and then they'll eventually hit what's called a paywall or a play wall, or some type of invisible barrier that prevents them from moving forward. And just to go into a little more detail, so a paywall means you have to spend money to get through this wall, like actual real money. And then a play wall is, you usually got to grind the shit out of it, and then you can get through it. Or combinations of both of those things. So what would happen is that when there were problems, getting to what Björn asked, when we would have problems that would be kind of outside of that norm that we would expect, or when because what happens is, you want to try to make a game that's a little bit different than everybody else. A lot of people were copying off of each other, and then they would try to twist it just like a little bit, and that would be like, okay, that's our version of the game. And then you would run across certain problems, and what happens is that if you're completely going off of copying someone else, or only you have a very small, like, repertoire of things that you can use, like tools you can use, you become very limited. Like, oh, we have this problem, let's go to our rule book, here's the only 3 things we can do. So it became very kind of narrow on what you could do. Anytime there was a problem, they would always go back, let's just do it the way we've always been doing it.
Could you say they didn't have the player's experience in mind while designing and doing decisions?
Yeah, I don't want to like go into too much detail of the like, I'm sure. Okay, so everyone was in different situations, and this isn't blaming who knew what and who didn't, and who didn't have the experience or who didn't, whatever. But during that time, I personally felt that design was not as heavily influenced in making a decision on if something was being incorporated or not. Again, you have to remember this is because of free to play. Things work differently. So what would happen is you would look at what needed to be done, and then you would follow like, oh, we need this to happen, so let's incorporate this type of feature. We need more people to do this. Let's incorporate this feature, which would bring us more people. That's kind of how it would be. It wasn't always like, hey, this is really cool, let's do this because it'll be something different and it can bring that. It would be more from the direction of, we know what is going to bring us certain numbers and we're just going to do those actions. So it has a big influence on like the type of games that you're able to produce. And then the other thing is that when you make games that are strictly, let's say, metric, designed completely based off of numbers, and please remember this is from years ago, things are a little bit different now, the industry has matured, they're doing things a little bit differently, but still some people are still using those old methods even today, especially when the going gets tough and the pressure builds, and things aren't going the way you want. You always sometimes say, hey, let's do it like we used to, let's fall back on those things. And what happens is that players that play your game level up over time. They get better at learning those types of games and understanding how those things work. And in the end, what happens is that they see through all those things that you're doing. So they're just like, yeah, I've seen this. I don't really care anymore. It doesn't have the same effect. So trying to do something completely from just the numbers, you just have business people and analysts, and kind of excluding the design or not putting enough weight to it is very dangerous.
Yeah. So then maybe as a counterpoint, my experience, I come more from kind of an indie startup world where whereas in John's case, it became very narrow and you were like, very mathematical about something that's still a game and an experience. I come from the world where it's more, assumption, like, let's just do this because, I think it's cool, which is also, of course, is something you always start with, but an important thing is then the verifying. So basically going in all directions and then not start to build some kind of box or framework of, what works and what is good and, is it true, is also kind of the other spectrum of the whole kind of what can go wrong. So metrics definitely has a place, but if you don't at all measure or set goals for yourself and goals on what you want to achieve and measure and see if you're achieving them and are the things you're doing help you achieve them, then you just don't know if you're going the right direction. It's a bit like, you have a goal, you can set up a goal, let's go to China, and then you just start walking and say like, well, I think it's the wind blows from this direction today, so maybe it's in this direction. You walk and you don't have a map, you don't have a compass. So metrics just helps you, when used correctly, not too strictly, helps you find the right direction and helps you also kind of level up as a designer when a designer kind of has that tool to kind of know that, oh, I did this decision, I thought it would be good, but it wasn't in reality. Oh, okay. So next time, of course you still should retry because, the scenario can change, but at least you start learning of what works and what doesn't.
Yeah. I don't want to claim that I came up with this term, but there was a term that I started pushing really hard when I was working with people from different backgrounds, and I was doing the design, and metrics would come up, and I said that we don't want to do metric driven design, we want to do metric informed design, so that we test the theory, like do something as fast as possible to test the theory, and then based off of that theory really think about the design. How can we arrange the design so that it's sorry, this is really upsetting me. How can we I'm going to shut my phone off. How can we adjust the design so that God, lost my train of thought, sorry.
So metrics informed design.
Yes, metrics informed design is that instead of just saying, oh, here's some numbers, let's quickly react, let's instead say that, hey, we've created this thing, we have the numbers that are giving us this type of information. How can we make the design in a better way, or incorporate some type of thing that we feel would adjust that number, but we're keeping it very much like keeping it from a designer's angle, not from let's just quickly do this thing because we know there's some numbers here. Like, you're not just staring at numbers all day. So the way to do that is that
well, we can talk about how we're doing it today in our current work, which is something we borrowed, or it's from a methodology called Lean, but we don't have to go into that right now. But basically what you do is, like, let's say we want to create something. Well, we don't have to have an example. You want to create something and you fill in this sheet. So you have a sheet, and on the left side, well, from your point of view, on this side. So on the left side you have, you start off with the background. Why are you even doing this? And then you write kind of up the goals, kind of, I think by doing this, like, let's say our goal is to, we want to have people do something, like have fun with some part of the game, and, and then we can create an assumption like, okay, we think that by improving on this thing, we'll get more people having fun, whatever, and that should be a concrete metric. Like, let's say, like, more people will use this part of the game, or, it's a bit bad because I don't have an example right now, but you write down your goals. Like, I think that, people will use assault rifles more now. 10% more people are going to use assault rifles, and 30% are going to use less knives, which is the problem or something for some reason. And then, and then you also write on the left side, the third thing you write is kind of, what are the concrete action plan, how to achieve this? Like, okay, we will, increase the power of assault rifles. That's gonna by this much, and then how we do that is by increasing the damage output, and we'll code it this way, and then you run a test. So you set up a time. Let's say, like, you also define the test period. So let's say we run a test. We get if you already have an audience of players, you can say, like, okay, we'll test with 100 people who are currently playing the game to see. Or then you can say, like, if you're not launched yet, you can say, like, I'll try it out with 10 of my friends. I'll invite them over and play the game and see, without influence, to see if it has changed their behavior. Yeah. And then that's the left side. So you only fill in the left side before you start. And then you have the right side, and that's after you've done that. And then you kind of go through, okay, did you achieve the thing? Was there 30% more of X? What did you learn? Oh, you might have learned that, the thing we thought was a problem actually wasn't a problem. And the third thing you define is, what is the next step? What should you do next? Well, we learned that it wasn't actually a problem. Knives are fine, and actually that's the thing that they liked about the game, and assault rifles might be irrelevant suddenly. Let's, for next step, actually increase the amount of, like, remove the whole assault rifles and see if they're actually having more fun, or whatever your background, your goal was. And that's a way to keep it informed, and it kind of also puts up goals. Like, even if you're not using strict metrics, it sets up goals and kind of communicates them. And you have somewhere, if you have, two designers, you have a way of discussing around the topic and keeping it very kind of easy to understand.
Yeah, I think the thing is, if you were to compare, this is why things get a little different or handled a little differently from free to play towards other types of non-free to play or premium games, let's call them, as the term might be. Maybe there's a new term that's going around. Um, in When you're designing a game where you've already have been paid for the game versus a game that you need to get money from the player, that has a dramatic effect. How can I say, on how you do your tests, the amount of time that you have to do these tests, and that's why things get kind of limited. If you look at the free-to-play kind of market, you're not going to see crazy out of nowhere games that have never been tested, tried and true. Maybe from a very small indie, something that just started in that. Normally what they'll do is they'll design a game with these tried and true mechanics and then do a little twist, reskin them, and kind of the metrics and these things are more geared towards paying attention to the amount of money that's coming in, like how much money they're making. Because what happens is there's a threshold, and if they don't reach that threshold, then they might even kill the project. But I would say that looking just I had mentioned it earlier, that for the people that are the one person indie guys and they're like, I don't want to do mobile, I don't want to do free to play, I don't want to do that, I just want to make my hardcore, roguelike pixel something for Steam, and I don't need any of those, this whole metric mumbo jumbo. Well, in reality, actually, there's another side to metrics, which is testing. You're actually testing your game, the features still in your game, and making sure you're even finding bugs in your game using metrics. So there is an importance there as well. So that's something that you need to keep in mind. So you might see like, oh, no one's going to this area at all, and why isn't these are just random, I'm pulling out of the air. So let's say you create a new area in your game and nobody goes there, and you're like, yeah, this is going to increase this thing and everyone's going to do this and everybody's going to play, and then nobody goes there. If you don't have a way of tracking that, you have no idea that, oh, there's a big freaking tree that's in the way of going into that it got shifted when we were setting it up. And this is a very generic, it's not the best example, but just a very...
But you can find those kind of things.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is actually I think that the indie scene is changing like all the time. Like Huffern here says, it's almost impossible to win money on an indie group unless you work in a medium big company. That it's harder and harder for indie companies to survive. And one page they should take from kind of maybe the free to play kind of playbook is that it gets more and more important. Like even if you have a premium game that you just pay and then you just consume it once, or you play it many times, but you just pay once, there's no free to play. You have to start thinking about how do you get users. Like Twitch as a platform is awesome. Like, is your game Twitchable? Like, can people stream it? Can it go to YouTube? Because you have to drive those people to still buy that premium game. People need to know about its existence, which means that the more you can build into the game kind of, they call it emergent gameplay, integration into Twitch, integration to whatever, think about how can people kind of have discussions around your game, the better. And even before your game is out, how can you create, like we discussed before, how can you create community, how can you all these things. And the easy way, or not, like a good toolbox when you're thinking about how to get people to buy your game, how will anybody know, is to think also about the metrics and then measure those things. That are people, people who play your game, are they referring to other people who might be interested? If not, could you do something that, okay, I bought this game, and then, oh, this way I can now, well, multiplayer, of course, is an easy way, but that's not enough. Like, how can I create communication? Like, I would then recommend it to Arash, like saying, like, hey, you should really play this game.
Let's say that you don't have any metrics set up and your game just sells and that's it. Like, what are you going to do next? Like, you're not going to know why at all. You won't know, are they all rushing to a certain place? Are they playing in a certain area? Are they even playing the game that I think they're playing? I made a game about zombies and everybody is just planting flowers in the backyard. Like, I'm not going to know if I don't have anything set up. So you're basically, if you have no metrics whatsoever, you're pretty much in the dark about what the people that are playing your game.
Yeah.
You know, you could go to a forum, yeah, you could talk to some people, but you know, if you have millions of people, that would be awesome, playing your game. You know, you should have them, even at the very minimum. You should have some things that are put in there that would be helpful for you.
So when you're designing your game, you should think about kind of what, like when you do informed decisions, it's easier to recreate, even if it's a totally different game in totally different genre, and you have a method to do an informed decision, and you can create better games through that. That you know is makes it easier on you, so that when you do your sequel or you do another game, like you have a higher chance of actually succeeding also on the second game. Like you see a lot of game companies who make the first game and then the second game is weird, nobody likes it. Like they don't even make the first game. One of their games succeeds, they don't know why. And then people expect the next game, like, oh, hopefully they'll release the game in, you know, their next super awesome game, they'll come up with new ideas. And then in 2 years when they come out with a new game and you're like, oh, this is weird. And it goes back to maybe the previous style games that they did before, like, because they didn't know what made they didn't have an informed or a methodology or a way of making games where they knew that they could kind of increase their chances of it being interesting and a good game.
Yeah, and that's not always a guarantee. I would say that at least from the mobile market, I don't know what the numbers are, but they're like from the App Store, it's staggering how how many games or apps are published in the App Store in just from the Apple side. Trying to make a game in that area or in that platform, in that market, without using any metrics is pretty much like, how can I say, a recipe for failure, because it's so hyper competitive right now, and there's techniques that are used by very big companies that it's extremely difficult to keep your head above water in there. There's, you know, they have these kind of user acquisition costs, which means
they pay to get users so much that you can't compete with them.
Yeah, so
except if you're extremely lucky. Like one of our friends, actually, who studied with us, did a game called Paco, maybe in English. It's an awesome game. You should try it out. It's a mobile game, and they did well. They won some, you know, awards, and they're doing, you know, they're running their company and able to sustain it with their income. But it's still very hard for them. And now I think they're now releasing their sequel to that. I think it's a new
Paco 2.
So Paco, but
I think they're in PAX East right now.
They're in PAX East. So hi guys, if you ever see this,
yeah, you should go visit them if you're there.
Alucard J has a good question here. Can you give an example of a minimum metrics you should incorporate? In other words, time started, play session time. Is this what you mean? I would say that, well, we might have different answers. I can answer it first, and then, you know, you can. Like, I would say that there is no like standard set. Like, of course, you should check, you know, how long in the game have they played, did they have problems, like if you put the start of the game to the end of the game or end of the level, did they get through? But in the end, it so depends on what your goal is right at that moment. Like when you're doing something, you should, in the beginning it's easier to just even test in a closed, like we had that talk about testing your game. That's the first metrics, is that you actually go and watch 10 people play your game. And then when moving on, when you get more and more people interested and you're trying to create kind of bigger scale tests, you have to custom tailor, in my opinion, and look at the things you want to achieve. What are your goals? If your goal is to, it depends on where you go. Like, of course, you can have basic metrics that tell you a bit about it, but those usually don't lead to informed decision. They're basically just what is called vanity metrics. Like, oh, it's cool, I have 60 new users today. So, but they're not what's called actionable. So when you look at the metric, you should know if the number says something, you go left, and if it says something else, you go right. So you kind of say like, let's say that my previous example, like you have a goal that you want to have a lot of gunfight in the game and it's not happening for some reason, and you want to increase that. And then you see that, okay, we think that by doing these, the amount of guns used is going to go up. So if you do that, like whatever metric you're measuring that by, let's say that you say, if you go, then if the certain metric says something, for example, you can say like, okay, we will now. Yeah. That was a bad example.
No. Let's use his about.
Maybe you can take over.
Well, I don't know fully the example, but let's say you have a game where you want more gunfights. Well, you can say that, okay, what is the test? Like, what are we trying to accomplish? We want more gunfights between people. So it's kind of the funny saying that you give a man a rope and he's going to hang himself. So you can do tests like, okay, you start having, let's say, you would already look at what are the things that you're trying. Yeah, it's very difficult because this is opening a big can of worms. But look at what data you're already tracking, of course, and then say like, okay, I'm going to do a type of test. They call this A/B testing, or say whatever you want to call it. And I'm going to say, okay, since this is so weird, okay, I'm going to increase the number of guns, and that will give me a certain result, or I'm going to, all the guns are going to be this, some other thing. Or let's make it easier. The blue guns will do something, I'm going to do blue guns and red guns. And then based off of it, the color, this is
really bad. But the point is, like, whatever
it's your fault, you chose guns.
Like I said, let's go back to the point. Like, it's very hard to give examples without having a good example prepared. But the idea is that when you get the results in, actually before you even start measuring, you already know that if your thing you're meeting is like at maximum, then you will increase guns, and if it's 0, you will remove all guns. Like, an action plan even before you're measuring.
Yeah.
If you basically go in and you're like, I'm going to start measuring session time, and you're like, okay, well, what are you going to do decisions based on that? Then, you're not really going to do any decisions because you don't know anything. It's still good to have those basic, key metrics throughout the game that, a good game should have a good retention. People are coming back to the game. People play it long. But those kind of what kind of metrics we mean is more like the more in-depth where you do drill down and you're like, okay, we implemented double jumping and we thought that would do something.
Yeah.
And then, already if we don't know that it doesn't do that thing, we can remove that whole double jumping altogether, or we'll actually keep it in the game. That could be the decision depending on what you were measuring.
I was going to say the platform also has a lot to do with it. So if you're making mobile and free-to-play games versus some other type, premium games, that also has an effect on these things, And of course, mobile and free-to-play and these other, they of course have all of these, that you mentioned, like DAU and ARPU and I mean all of these things. And the thing is, that's nice, but and as Björn said, what can become very dangerous is, yeah, it's a vanity thing. You just get excited, but when it's going bad, that's when you have problems, because you don't know what, if you don't know what to do to affect those things, then you have a problem. And especially if you have a game that's so far out there that you have no idea why it's even working, it's extremely scary for a team to say, hey, let's change this thing, because you have no idea what that thing is going to do. So you need to have something in place and say, like, okay, we don't know why this is happening. We have this information. We're going to now test something. We're going to do a very small test. And based off of that test, if this goes, whatever this is, we're going to make this choice and then see what happens. One thing to keep in mind, it's kind of scary as well, is there's short-term things, but then there's also things that'll happen over a very long term. So you might be like, oh, we'll just do this and it'll be good, and you'll see this, let's say, increase in your numbers. But what happens is, and this is what's really dangerous, I would say, especially if you're in the free-to-play area, that what'll happen is the old school things might, I would say, have changed, but a long time ago, where you end up actually screwing your players over for short-term returns, and then you're like, yeah, look, our numbers are really high now, we have a good thing. But what happens is that, yeah, your short-term numbers are high, but you end up burning those players and they end up leaving. So over the long term, this, it's their lifetime value of that player decreases. But sometimes if you don't really know, you don't see that. And
yeah, I would say, like, it's when you don't have the experience. In the other hand, what is the experience of the game, like, where you're not thinking about that, what are the emotions and what are the experiences that people are having while playing. I mean, you shouldn't always just think about that. The free-to-play games, sadly enough, usually don't think too much of that. A bit,
not
like
all.
Supercell does a semi-decent, that they care a bit at least. Like,
they have something successful going, so they're doing
people
something.
Keep playing, so people are enjoying at least some. And but it's more like, and the other thing that can happen also, that a lot of people get frustrated when you talk about metrics, and that's because you might not know what to do. Like, if there's another thing where you just measure everything and you just start drilling down. It's like, if you ever used Google Analytics in any project, you can sit there and click open link after. It's like Wikipedia, and you're like, oh, there's a 1 there and there's a 2 there, and what if, and then it's like, there was this metrics, a good presentation, which said that they drew, someone did a calculation that, what was it, that every year there's a rainy year.
Nicolas Cage and drownings.
Yeah, Nicolas Cage and drowns. People drown when Nicolas Cage
makes a movie.
So you can make these irrelevant connections, and that's why it's so important. Like the previous method we were saying, like you have that sheet, where you have, like, on one side you have the background. We're implementing more guns because we think something, whatever, or double jumping, or we're gonna do something with the game, whatever you're doing, and then you write what do you expect to happen, and also kind of already talk about kind of, okay, if it does this, we'll do this next, and if it does this, we'll do this next. And then you also do an implementation plan, like, okay, these are the steps how we actually get that programmed or made the art made or whatever you're doing. And then after that, you also have the kind of what's it called, like a debrief, where team sits down and then let's look at the values, and that also helps the whole team to understand, so that if you have in your company a metrics guy or something else, he just comes in and shouts some numbers, people are just going to be like, I don't know, he's saying 5% went to 6% and now we need to scale, and you're like, I don't know what's going on, scale, press the buttons, and then everybody just feels in a state of flux. So this is it's a good methodology, and there's you can develop your own, but it's very important to kind of basically you should already know the answer of partially your metrics before you even start measuring, because you should have expected outcomes.
Yeah, you should know what you want, and it should feel like I need X number of people to do this thing. 50 people need to be able to pass this point in the level, and if they don't, that means this platform is broken and people can't make the jump. If I was just throwing out a number there, so I made a platformer. I made the level out, and there's a little jump, like where there's a mushroom or a little thing here, and you don't know if you don't have that set up. And
Arash, that jump is easy. I think everybody can make that. Our players are stupid if they can't make that.
Exactly. Whereas instead what you do is you can say, okay, cool. Well,
let's make it wider. I can do it. I've been playing this for 600 hours while developing. Let's make it as big as the screen. You can't even see the edge.
So what happens is that if you don't have any metrics set up at all, and what happens is you have to think this way.
Which actually, by the way, can be true, that it's easy. And when you measure it, you know.
Let's do this way. Let's say you have it usually starts from a very larger problem, and then you work your way down. So let's say that you have a metric set up that all it tests is the person completed the level. That's it. And then you notice between levels, the first 5 levels of your game, it's like everyone's flown through it. And then level 6 is like it takes 1 hour for people to play your game. And let's say that you also know how many people actually play your game.
He's using Dark Souls as an example.
Yes. Actually, Dark Souls would be level 1. You died 5 billion times.
You get through the tutorial, and then after that, you just die when the dragon stomps on you.
It. Yeah, but anyway, and then what happens is you notice certain things. You know, hey, there's something strange. We have so many people playing this game, but the majority of them can't get past this point. What is it? So from that point, you immediately have your designers sit down and they look at this and they say, they evaluate the level and think, what could be wrong here that's preventing people from getting through it? There's different ways to find this information. There's metrics, there's user tests, there's many different ways.
It might be just a programmer come and tell you like, hey, I've been trying this level 6 for 6 hours.
Exactly. I
don't know what you guys were thinking.
Yeah, the information can come
or the cleaner. I don't know if you leave to let him play the game.
The information can come from anywhere. And then what happens is that then you say, okay, hey guys, the designers will make a educated guess and say like, hey, we think it's here. Let's do this. And what you'll do is, you'll lower the platform, a little bit lower here and then, or move it this way. It's either the height or this way. So you can do a test and then see, oh, now everybody goes through. So you've kind of unclogged the problem. If you haven't, then you're like, okay, this is very black or white, on or off. But the idea is there that you're using metrics to solve an actual design issue, not,
But then comes also the thing that, what do you do in addition to this you can do? For example, let's say now you're clearing the level, it takes them like 30 seconds. But actually, the one that was 6 hours to complete it actually was more fun. Like in Dark Souls, it's fun because you can't get through the first door because the skeleton hits you in the head and kills you and you start crying. You never want to go out again.
You don't like it.
No, I liked it, but I haven't played it enough. But anyway.
I like the punishment.
Yeah, so let's say the players like the punishment. That's the thing that they kind of keep coming back to and want to play 6 hours the same level. So what you can do in addition to not be blindsided by just your own thoughts, also from that perspective, is that after you did this test, you can actually interview those people who were involved in the test and talk to them. Like, hey, what did you think about the game in general? What did you think about the level 6? People seem to have been problems, and they're like, no, it was actually a bit boring, or yeah, it was really awesome, and you can see kind of their eyes light up or not.
Let's say another thing. Let's say, for example, you don't have access to your players and you can't talk to them. And let's say you incorporated that change to lower the platform so that everybody could go through it. But then you notice that, after level 8, everybody stops playing your game. that might be a big jump. You might notice that, okay, what was actually difficult, like he was saying, people actually enjoyed your game before. Now what you've done is you made your game completely boring.
Yeah,
So
but
that's the, these are the things you
that's
have
another
to
way
work
to do it. The only thing that's better with, if you have access to the player, which you should have, because
Exactly.
you should build your channels to your players. So you're talking to them constantly and creating community. You're talking to them. You're having conversation as a peer with them. And I think an
That's
important
what
thing.
Supercell is doing. They have a strong community.
Yeah, and that helps you because then you also know so much about their emotions and why they're doing it, and it just makes it easier so that you don't just look at the stats like, oh, here's the small graphs. Like,
and trying to
you can still look at them so that, because you also have to verify, players will say something, but they might actually unconsciously be doing something else. So you should of course verify with the stats, but you should also just talk to people, because if everybody's talking about, oh, this is so awesome because it's so hard, you start knowing like, maybe we should make this game even harder. Like, what if we make it a really steep curve, and then you can try it out, and it's like, oh, even more people are playing, and they're spending now 60 hours with the game, and it's like, what the hell? But these are just hypotheticals. I mean, it's just to show you, I think the important maybe to take away from this is to kind of not see metrics. It's just a tool, and you should learn how to use it, not see it as bad or good, or or get blind or rely on too much.
I give a real world example that I went through. That what was happening was that it was at the tail end of my project was finished, and I got brought into another team to work on another project that was like a kind of a strategy game, and it was all already developed, going. There's a whole thing going on, and what was happening was, for some reason, it was an international game, and there was people that they didn't have signups from a certain country. There was like problems for some reason. And what it came down to was, I had a guess. Like, my guess was that we noticed that people were dropping off. Like, they have funnels basically. You can see, like, at this screen so many people did this. At this screen so many people did this. And there were 10,000 people that came in, and at the very end, 1,000 got through. And then you can see these drop-offs. And the interesting thing that I noticed was that there was a huge amount of people dropping off when you put your name in. Like, please enter your name of your character. And there was a huge drop off. It was crazy. Yeah, exactly. Björn. Exactly. Well, that's in the direction of what the problem was. So what happened was that
I'm a good tester. Doesn't work.
So what was happening, I was like, this is very weird. If you're coming into this game and you're getting turned off when it's asking you to put in a name for your character in the game, something is wrong to have such a drop off.
A name for my character? Bullshit! How dare they?
Yes, that's privacy. Yeah. But anyway, so what happened was,
they should name my character.
Yeah, and I happen to have been working not on the language files for. Basically, what happens is, we'd have an Excel on the project I was working on, where we would have a list of words that were in the game, and then you have a company that would translate the word in many, many, many different languages, and then you'd incorporate that in your game, and then it would detect what country you're in, and you can change the language and blah blah blah, so you can play the game in your native language. So what we noticed was, I had a theory that I needed to test. I didn't have to use A/B testing. I didn't have to do anything. All I needed to do was look at those numbers and say, like, hey, let me do a test. And I changed my keyboard to different types of keyboards, and I got to Polish. And when I started typing into Polish, it just stopped accepting half the characters. Like, they couldn't even type in. So what was happening was, there was an entire country of people that were using certain letters, and they weren't able to even put in their names, and they were like, "Oh, I can't even use this. It only accepts a few."
I can only be Joe from America.
Exactly, and they were just like, "Okay," and the thing is, you're like, "Yeah, but it's just a name. Who cares?" But you have to remember a thing about user psychology and people that play those. That was a strategy game, pretty hardcore. Those people might be the type, have the mentality where, okay, look, I'm only 2 steps in. They already have a problem with just, I can't even put my name in the damn thing without it being, broken. It doesn't work already. And they'll just leave, especially this is for free to play games, because they'll say, there's already a billion other things, a billion other games that are out there that are also free that I can play that don't have this problem, and then they'll get up and leave. Yeah.
And it can even be a total blocker, because if you're typing in and the first character you type is not accepting, and you're like, oh, I can't type anything here, and then you're trying to press next and it says you have to have a name. Well, I can't type anything. I have to have a name. Well, I'm stuck, and they're not gonna call your tech support being like, hi, I'm Bob with a Z instead of a B with 6 dots on top of it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's actually pronounced Bob, and
of course,
then they're just gonna quit your game.
Of course, this is different when you're not in free to play. But I'll give you another example. But they can take advantage. It is
relevant to every type of game, because
it is,
especially these days when you can return games. Like,
that's what I was gonna say.
You go to Steam and you buy a game, and then oh, I couldn't play it because you never got into the game. If you're under that certain limit, they'll just return your game and get their money back.
And let's say this goes back to that metric. If you notice that everybody buys your game, one benefit of Steam that I can say that it has the comment section at the bottom, and versus some of the other games, they're like, you got to go to forums and do all this, and But if you notice people are all leaving your game in the first 5 minutes, then you're like, holy crap, this game's 10 hours and everybody leaves in the first 5 minutes. Something.
But that comment section is actually awesome. Like, if another thing that kind of balances out the metrics is talking to the community, and Steam is great because you have the community right there underneath if you're like an early access or greenlit or whatever, you have a discussion thread, and even in their forums you have your discussion threads for games. And then, of course, you can also go to, create your own forum if you're not selling on Steam or whatever. But it's really good to open a channel of some kind to your audience and talk to them, because, of course, you have to sometimes take it with a grain of salt. Like, you should not do everything that, user ABC is suggesting. But still, just hearing that, what's going through the minds of the people who are playing it. And actually, you'll hear it from your most hardcore audience, because they take the time to write all that, draw the fan art, write the, fan fiction, or write the negative comment or the positive comment. And you should still be aware of what they're talking about. I mean, especially as a designer, if you have like a huge group of people, ripping your game into pieces, saying they hate it, of course, it's like, oh, shit. It hurts, but a good skill to learn is to not take it too personally, look at it, and also be,
you should be thankful to those people that they're taking their time out to.
Of course, they're trolls. Don't ignore them. But
no, but
everybody's a troll.
But
He's
a lot
a troll.
Of people,
I am a troll.
I would say that if you have a forum and someone goes and creates an account and goes there to tell you about a problem about your game, they've already gone through several barriers that most people would just stop playing your game. They are passionate enough about aside from the trolls, that, hey, I'm now going to go find this person's forum. I'm going to create an account, and with a password, I'm going to log in. I'm going to find this place, put in this message, submit. Like they're actually trying, because they probably care about your game than most of these other people. Yeah. So those are, I'm not saying, now we have to be extremely careful. Just because they're vocal in the forums doesn't mean that they represent the majority player for your type of game. and you don't want to just run after everything they
no.
say.
Exactly.
You know, changing your game because there's one vocal person in a forum. That's not what you want to do. But you do want to. I give you example because I was doing the community management and in for a while, and one of my friends actually is even better. That one place I worked, they wouldn't even allow the designers in the forums because they didn't want us to be influenced by the players. So what they would have is they'd have the community person in between, and the community manager, coordinator, whatever they are, would collect the, kind of global idea, like thing that's going on, the trends and the, what's big or what are things that are
Weather in
problems.
Germany today.
Yeah, and then what they would do,
-7.
what they would do is then they would report that back to the designers, kind of like, hey, this is the biggest thing that's going on right now, or to the producer or whoever, and then they would make a decision, or the lead designer or whoever, and then they would say like, oh, okay, this is the thing, and then not really saying like, yes, they suggest this is how you should fix it. They would just say, hey, this thing they're arguing because it's imbalanced, and then they're leaving it up to the designers to work through like, okay, hey, we should do this. And this kind of goes slightly to the, in addition to that, I was saying earlier that you should have your, if your metrics slash business slash whatever person or, and your marketing or whoever, they work closely with the designer, and you work like as a team, not kind of against each other. It's definitely in your benefit. But if you work the other way, where the designer just is a tool to get something accomplished, you're going to have problems, because what will happen is you'll have someone come up and just say like, oh yeah, just make this change, and not really understand the repercussions that can happen. So you'll have people that get caught in this kind of, you'll have designers that are caught in these awkward situations of, they either, do I do this or do I care about this? They just have to do it when they know that if I make this change, this system is going to be so broken, the project's going to die. And I would really say that if you're, pay attention to your development team, if you're a producer or project manager or product owner or whatever, pay attention to your development team, because I guarantee you they will know that your project is failing long before you even do, based off of certain decisions that are made.
Yeah.
They'll see the writing on the wall way in advance. So if
they will also like what happens a lot of time is like the designer actually loses his passion, because basically he gets crushed, because he's like, okay, I know this is not gonna work, and I can't do anything about it.
Exactly.
And they can start even doubting themselves, where it's like, I don't even know if I know anything anymore, and then what happens is quite fast, it infects a lot of the top part of your company, and then you can even drive your company down just because of this fact. So
yeah, the morale will go down for everybody.
So a good thing if you're higher up, is to, morale is not just, hey, let's have a party. It's also, people, something good is happening when people really enjoy coming to work. They really feel passionate, and they really, do things that they feel matters. Even if you're, you still can have strict business goals.
Yeah.
But it also means that if they're passionate still, even if you have strict business goals, like, hey, we just have to get, day one or day something, this much money or whatever, we're under a bit pressure, it will also lead to, that then they really understand why, and they understand what's going on, versus if they're left clueless, like, we don't know that we're running out of money, we just think that everybody's insane, then it can break the whole team even before you run out of money.
Yeah, I would say that if you're in a company or you're working, if you're in a team, the more open and honest you can be with people, you would be amazed how respect you'll get from people if you're open and honest with them. That, when the going gets tough and people like love the team and they're passionate and they're, those people could, I don't want to say that's a good example, but they'll do extra time because they want to.
Well,
they might not even take pay because, hey, we can't pay you this month. No one, I can't even pay myself, but they're like, we're going to keep working so that.
That's not necessarily good, but
It's
they will.
not good, but I'm telling you.
But they will move mountains, even if it doesn't
That's what I
mean
mean.
that they are killing themselves, because that's also not good.
That's
if
not
their
good at
personal
all.
life goes down the drain.
No, you don't want that to happen.
That
But
won't last. But I mean, they will move mountains in the way that, when there's a problem, they all pull together and then they push together much stronger than, if there's a huge problem in the office community and culture, it might be that there's just one guy pushing on the problem where you need the whole backing of the team, and then the guy doesn't have it. Yeah. And then, it just moves a fraction where he needs the whole team behind him, and it's like, okay, it's come to the thing where this is a huge problem. We need to get this fixed. And then when you have that, it's like, oh, we moved it. It's like moving a cupboard. It's like, oh, okay, we had 3 guys, we moved it there. Okay,
I think
should we move something else? Oh, we moved that too.
I think the thing to be clear is, it's like we're moving that cupboard for this reason, and everybody's clear. And it comes down to, now that we're talking about management and work life, but there's one being a leader and there's being a boss. And if you have a leader leading your team, leader is the person that's in the trenches working with you, defending you from, other people, other management, other shareholders, wherever, and keeping the stress on themselves so it doesn't trickle down, so that you can do the best job that you can. And then there's a boss who just kind of is like demanding, telling you what to do, micromanaging you, blaming you for all these things. And then what happens is these two different people, the teams follow them in different ways. One, you're just coming to work. The bad one is you just come to work and do your job and want to go home, and you're kind of very low morale, and you're like, okay, I'm miserable, but hey, I'm here. And then the other one is like, oh my God, this is really hard, but I know that if we work hard and push through this, we might make it. But if we don't, it was an awesome experience. So this is, off of just these,
And in addition, a good leader is also someone who takes the time to explain, and actually not necessarily themselves explain, but allows people to talk and share the expertise, so that, if you're the designer and you don't understand some other party of the team, like you don't understand the programmer, you don't understand the marketing, you can have where they're sharing knowledge of what are they doing. In the end, the basics is not that difficult, like the basic steps of what is going on, why are the things, because then you start understanding what that person's goal is and why he's pursuing it. Because in the end, everybody wants, most of the time, what's good for the company, and they're just trying to do their job and do it well. And when sharing this information, suddenly you can find those extra pair of hands to move that mountain again, because they understand just the basics of the premise of why you are talking about something.
If somebody came to me from their department and were like, hey, I need your help, this is what we're trying to do, this is the problem, I'm much more, and they explain how and why the best of their ability.
Like take the whiteboard, draw out a bit of boxes saying, here, this is what I'm working on, here's the system, or here's the thing. And even if you think they won't understand, a lot of time people are quite smart and they'll pick up.
And when you say, hey, you would be amazed that suddenly someone from a kind of department that isn't doing the same things that you're doing might actually come up with the solution to help you solve your problem. Or at least it might not be like, here's what you do. It's more like, hey, what about this? And you're like, oh, wait, that's a different way of thinking. And then you can lead, you're the one that continues from there and solves the problem. So, but
yeah, we've kind of pivoted a bit to a different discussion, but still very relevant, and maybe we can discuss that more. But yeah, pay attention to metrics, pay attention to your team, pay attention to your customers / players.
Yeah, and
try to be, I think in general, open is a good thing. Like, open towards metrics, open towards your players, open towards your team. Like, very rarely openness has led to disaster. So usually when you start hiding and squirreling things and kind of defensive about things, that's when things start going bad.
Yeah, and again, for all of the kind of one-man teams that are like, oh, I don't even know this, I'm just trying to get, try to figure out what's the bare minimum that you can, what's important to you for your game, and how can it help you, and try to find out how can you incorporate those somehow.
Even if your first thought is just like, hey, I just been working on this game, but now these guys talk some about metrics, so maybe I should set up a goal. What if my goal is I'll do this? Like my first goal is, what if I could get 100 people playing my game? And that's my first goal. And what I will do is I will do these things to achieve that. Like I'll invite my friends. I know I can get 10 friends to play it. And I know maybe they can invite friends of friends. Maybe I can get 20. Okay. Then I'm also active on this forum. Maybe I can send there, and then I'll get 50 more. Well, I'm still 30 short now. So, and that's how you start thinking. And then you set up, and then you reach the goal where 100 people. It doesn't sound like a lot, but 100 people has played your game.
Yeah. And then based off of that, what are you going to do? I'm going to get 100 people, and I'm going to get this actionable thing from it.
Yeah.
Then what am I going to do now that I know? After I get 100 people and they've all done this, now I'm going to do X. Or if they haven't, now I'm going to do Y.
And in the end, you're still developing the exact same game. You're sitting there wherever you are and you're having fun, but you also kind of have a goal. And that helps you, which is one of the biggest problems for one-man teams, is to just complete the game. Because you kind of chew it up into smaller chunks, and it gets much more motivating when you have other people part of your community, part of your game, even if they're not part of the development team, even if you want to keep that to yourself, if that's the reason why you're doing it alone, then, you still kind of, it motivates you and, pushes you forward and pushes you to complete your game.
Yeah.
But yeah, on those notes, maybe.
Mr. K.
Oh,
what's up? Welcome back.
Welcome.
We were just talking about metrics. You're going to have to check it out later.
Check it out on YouTube and follow us for the people who aren't already following us. We do this every Tuesday, and on Thursday I also make my Let's Make a Game, where I make a game and you can follow along and send me whatever your ideas and thoughts and opinions, and we can even discuss game development. I don't care. It's an open forum.
Yeah. So I think that is a good wrap up for this portion of the discussion about metrics. Well, more about, is your feature good or not? I hopefully this helped answer some of that or not, but hopefully it did. And then now what we can do is we can move on to the next part, where Björn and I will play a game, and then we're going to evaluate
Give them all heart attacks.
Give them all heart attacks.
Team heart attack.
Team heart attacks, yeah. We're going to play basically every time at the moment, maybe things change in the future, but we're going to play a game and then try to play it and think like a designer would and evaluate it. We're still learning the process of what's the best way to show you guys. So the new way we're going to try now is we're just going to play the game a little bit first, and then after we've played it a little bit, that we have an understanding of how it plays, then we can stop for a moment and kind of break it down for you. But at the same time, while we're playing, we're of course going to think out loud. I was personally going to try, now I'm going to try to do this, and I'm doing this because of this, or can I push here? So we'll do this.
I've always, I've done in the past, always when you see me doing something weird, sometimes I just stand there and jump. I'll tell you, okay, I'm looking at this part. I'm interested. This feels very juicy, and I'm seeing how does that feel, or how is it moving from a programming or design perspective. How did they do this, or if it is something I already know, I'm just checking. Maybe I'm just checking. Oh, they did it this way. Okay.
And the reason we're doing this, actually, well, because we enjoy doing it, but I would say the main reason we're doing it is that we're hoping that when you go and play games, you'll be able to kind of, by listening to us, thinking out loud and seeing how we're breaking down things over and over and over with all of these different games, you'll kind of be able to see games from a different perspective. And then when you're building or working
Hello,
on
Rap. Sorry.
What's up, Rap? When you're working on your own games, you're going to be like, hey, I remember when I played these other games, that's how these things worked. And then when you play your own game, and you can get ideas that way, how you solve problems even, like, oh, that's how that problem seemed there, that's how they solved it. But also when you're designing your own game, you'll notice that you're going to be breaking things down in the same way and seeing your game from that angle as well. Seeing your game as a designer, not as a player, that's actually a very critical thing. I know a lot of people that they really enjoy playing games. They think that they can design games, but they don't think like designers. They continue as they're making their game to just think like, they keep thinking like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do this and this is fun and this, instead of saying like, okay, I'm gonna do this for this reason, and it's almost like, what is fun? Where is this fun coming from? What are the things that are leading to this?
I remember when I was a kid, even like I was in, I think, high school, and I had to write an essay on, just some random topic. And how I did, because I was playing crazy amount of games, and I didn't really read books that early yet. Well, high school maybe I did, but anyway.
You can read?
I didn't know how to read. I was writing like this essay, and I was writing it like a game plays, and that's, I think, how players think. It's like, oh, the man went into the room, and then I was in the room, and then I looked up, and then I shot a guy, and then I went to the other room, and then there's a cactus, and I was thinking about the cactus, and then I'm shooting into space, and you just think it as a story or a flow, versus it's like, oh, he needs to be able to walk. He's moving both sideways and up, and he has 360 view or whatever,
Yeah, but why does he have that? Like, why does he need that at all?
Yeah.
Like, why do you need to be able to double jump for, like, what's the even point of having that? Yeah. Oh, they have that there because, these are where these most rare items are, at the tops of the trees, and the only way to get to them is by double jumping, and in the beginning his double jump's not strong enough. But what we'll do is we'll allow him to level up over time after a certain point, and then he would have to come back here after he's leveled up, and then he can get those things at the top of the tree.
No, I just shot up into the tree, and then I was climbing, and then there was a monkey, and I double jumped into that tree, and then I was there.
So
anyway.
So I think that's the,
So maybe we should set up the game?
Yeah.
What was the game we were going to play?
Lovers in a Dangerous Space-Time.
Oh, we're going to be lovers now. Yes. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be lovers in just a moment.
In a dangerous space time. Okay.
Your nipples are hard, dude.
No.